Thanks for your time being here with us, and I guess I'll begin with a couple of notes. Superintendent had asked each of us as department leaders to provide a workshop in our area, and you know, with my work at the camp, it's so seasonal. You know, where we go through the camp season, and really once April 1st comes, it's hard to focus on anything else until everything's done. And so then, by extension, the men's ministry kind of becomes quite seasonal too. And you know, I don't really get to turn focus toward that until our camp season is done. The result is, I sometimes feel like I don't offer as much to this area as I'd like to. So I brought three guys that are hands-on in ministry to men, and I guess so. One guy was mentioning to Alan and Nolan, we're talking out in the foyer a minute ago, and Nolan Sanders, he says, well, all of man's lives are seasonal. Hunting season, football season, kids season, work season, all that. So made me feel better. But I guess my thought was that we could learn from one another, and if you want to participate in the discussion, my phone number is up there. I did block you, Nathan, so you can't bother me. But we're going to have these three guys share and introduce themselves first, and we'll go just across here. Pastor Randy, introduce yourself and a little bit about your family, perhaps.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Lucas. Appreciate everything that you do, man. You're a gift. So my name's Randy Hawney. I serve as the lead pastor at Harvest Valley Church in Forest. It's a church plant that we planted in September 12, 2021. And I have a wife, and we've been married 20 years this July, which is so crazy. And then I have 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy. And we have a lot of men in our church. And so we're learning how to disciple them and to do what we're talking about today.
Great. Okay, next up, Alan Peltz. Alan, what's your work and family situation?
Yeah, so I'm Alan. I run a software development company. We do IT staffing software, so we build apps, right? Mobile apps, things like that. Been doing that for my whole career. Really been involved in men's ministry I don't know, ever since I became a man, maybe. And so a lot of different iterations of that. And I don't know, that's evolved a lot. Right now you can see it says Wild at Heart is one of the things I'm really involved with, and also CBMC. Some of you guys might know what that is, to Christian Businessmen's Connection.
Great. What Christian Businessmen Connection, what is that? Is that a weekly gathering, or how does that operate?
Well, they do a lot of different things. They do like is it the Paul Timothy Project? Mark, are you in here?
I'm right here.
There we go. Is it called the Timothy Project?
Operation Timothy.
Operation Timothy, yeah. So they do that. That's kind of like a one-on-one mentorship. And then there's things like groups that meet more often, kind of a normal small group type thing. The thing that I'm actually involved with is a TAF, a Trusted Advisory Forum. So that's for business leaders that get together. They really just help each other work through business problems in a godly way. It's one of the most valuable things I think I've ever been involved with as a business leader, to have 12 guys that are either founders or CEOs or whatever in their company, and I bring a problem that I'm dealing with, and for an hour and a half or two, they're giving advice and opinions and prayerfully considering things like that. So it's a really cool thing for business leaders.
Excellent, thank you. Pastor Dave, yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dave Shostrom, and I've been married a lot longer than Randy has, and I still feel I'm a man. And Connie and I were talking last night. It'll be 53 years here in a few months. But we have 4 sons that we've raised, and I pastored basically for 50 years, but currently I'm the executive director of North Dakota Adult and Teen Challenge, and so I spend most of my days dealing with men. In particular, I do with women as well, but men who have been incarcerated. A lot of them have come from that, from there, or at least they're under they're addicts and alcoholics, and we're discipling them into becoming men of God. And to me, it's the most exciting part of my life that I've ever had.
Wonderful. All three of you guys are heavily involved in ministry to men in business world, teen challenge, adult teen challenge, and pastoring. Let's think about for a moment for you guys your own development as a man of God. What would you say? Don't need all three of you necessarily to answer, but what would you say was a key moment, key relationship, or a key decision that, as you look back on your life, you say that moment really impacted me? I'll share one for myself. Coming out of college, it was a tough transition into life on my own, and I remember on the way through from home to Valley City, where I was pastoring, stopped in Findlay at my grandpa's house, and he knew I was struggling with that transition of life. And he said, "Lucas, you need to gird up the loins of your mind like a man." And it always, it was a big moment in my life where, yes, I'll take that challenge. I'll accept that. How about for you guys? Was there a key moment, relationship, or decision in your life that you can look back on?
I think for me, I've had a lot of good relationships in my life, but I think what it has been is it's been a couple men in my life who've declared things that they saw about me when I didn't believe it. Like that was really big. Like my dad, and then Superintendent Leon Freetag. So I was like 25 years old, new out of church, and he invited me to the presbyter meetings. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like these guys are just legends, and I'm sitting there like a little dork, not knowing what I'm doing. And then he came up to me and he said, "The reason I invited you here because I see you one day at this table." And that was foundational for me, because sometimes you can't see those different leadership qualities or different things in your life, but it took somebody to say, "I want to invite you into what's happening, and then I'm going to speak over you what I see in your life." And I think for me that was so foundational.
Interesting, excellent. Alan?
It's interesting, about a week ago, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she's complaining about how she didn't feel like she was really good at anything. And she was like, "Oh, I'm not good enough at volleyball, and I'm not good enough at basketball, and I'm not good enough at," she wants to be a writer and an artist and all these things. And I was like, "Cameron, I vividly remember the first time I remembered thinking I'm actually good at something." And I think I was 18, so you have some years. But that was the moment for me. I remember when I was 18, I had been, I grew up on a farm, and I had been helping, my dad farm for a while, and we had a combine that we bought. I think I was maybe 15 when we bought the combine, and we were sitting at the dinner table, and my dad said to my mom, "Ellen knows that combine better than I do." And he's like, "I think he could fix it faster than I can, and he runs it better than I can." And I was like, that's the first time I've ever been good at something useful. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment for me of growing up as feeling like I'm a real man.
Excellent, great. Pastor Dave, you?
I guess I couldn't say that I've had a moment when lightning struck and I said I'll be a man from this point on, but I do think there were transformative moments in my life. And as I were talking, I was thinking about probably one of the greatest transitions I made. I was in my 20s and pastoring a church on the West Coast, and it was the end of the year, and as we were moving into the new year, took a week of fasting and prayer, and I asked the Lord to change me. And I came away from that a couple things. One was, I don't think I'll ask God to do that in my life again, because there was painful moments, okay? A lot of painful things that happened in that, but it was transformative. Amazing things happened in my life at that point, and it really changed who I was. There were other moments like that, but that was one that really stands out in my mind. And I would just, in response, my sons are growing up. They're not perfect by any means. They've had a lot of things that they've done that's disappointed me. But one of the things that I have appreciated them saying back to me, is they will write me a note, or they'll ask me about something, and they'll just say, "You're a man of God." And for my children to recognize that has really been really rewarding to me.
Excellent. I have a story. It was neither transformational or impactful, but it's kind of funny. I used to mow the lawn back home. My dad's sitting down here, and I thought one day I should get paid for this. And so I went to the bargaining table, and he said no. And then he went and started mowing himself, and I felt so guilty. I ran and got the weed whacker and got to work. So, I do some giveaways here today, and I don't have a high-tech method of passing them out, but if you want to win something here, you can just go to our men's ministry website, ndmen.org/win. Give your name, and then we'll select off of those, ndmen.org/win, and you can sign up to win one of those. 2 Corinthians 2:11 talks about Satan's devices, and it doesn't list them, but it says we need to be aware of them, and it says lest we're going to be taken advantage of. So if there's ignorance in the way Satan is working against us, we'll be easily taken advantage of. What would you say are the primary devices that Satan uses against men today? And you guys on the floor, you can text me an answer too. But what do you guys think? What are some devices Satan is using against men?
I think insecurity. I think there's a lot of obvious things we can say too, but I think insecurity and just when we compare ourselves to each other. And I just think, our identity is not found in what other people are doing. Our identity is found in what God has called us to do. And I think in ministry, that's such a trap, just to say, like, man, compared to that guy, I'm not doing much at all. And so I just think that trap of insecurity is this device. And then when we compare ourselves to other people, it can just breed that insecurity, and then and then we start doing things just to try to prove ourselves or our identity, which is such a trap. So I think that's one of them.
That's excellent, Pastor Randy. Just a little example of insecurity. I opened up with a disclaimer about I don't feel like I'm doing very good with men's ministry. Why do I feel like I have to say that? It's out of insecurity. It really is. And this thing of insecurity plays out in so many ways. I've written a devotional recently on the topic of insecurity and how it played out in the life of King Saul. And why did he? What brought down his kingdom really was insecurity. And I wonder, when we first find Saul, God has selected him to be king, and what's he doing? He's hiding. And I've always thought that was out of humility, but I wonder if it was more out of insecurity. Like, I don't want to be the one to do this. Because his whole life, his whole kingdom was marked by his insecurity. He was threatened by David. He was threatened by... And David, the whole story of Scripture, all he wanted was the best for King Saul. And that is so significant, I think, in our lives. And if you watch yourself, and you kind of... If we have self-awareness, we'll notice points where it comes out. We had a camp director conference a few weeks ago, and I led worship at these evening sessions, and the second night I totally butchered it. And the speaker came up to me and he said, "Hey, great job," and I just couldn't help myself. I had to say, I really butchered it tonight. Like, why? And that's insecurity that comes out. Alan or Pastor Dave, just to follow that line of thinking, do you have anything to add on that?
I think to piggyback on what Randy said, I think the other thing is, I think one of the things that is working against men today is we're being devalued. That in most of society, what's happening is like the old saying, if you want a man to do the job, get a woman. And that's kind of what's happened to us in society, and that is that men struggle with what value they really have. Most can, you look at it, most can do as well or better than they can, and they're being reminded of it all the time. Media, everything that's out there kind of pumps it into them, and it feeds into the insecurity because they are struggling with what value do they have. And playing along with that then is, I think free time is a disadvantage as well. And that is that generations before me worked long, put in long hours, and you know, it made their life would feel, they've had a certain satisfaction of completing a task, kind of. And we kind of live in a life where we don't work those kind of hours. We're not as tired. We have a lot of more active, fun stuff. And I'm glad I live now, not then. But that also becomes a trap for us because, and then with all the free time that gives you opportunity, you know, I think one of the big things tied to that Satan uses is internet and social media. Get caught up into that stuff, and we have time to do it. And I think that really drags down the life of a man.
Excellent. One moment, Alan. You know, Pastor Dave, you mentioned devaluation, and I just thought, like, what happens when the dollar is devalued? You need more dollars to buy what you purchased before. So if you think about men being devalued, and you think, I just jotted this down, you need to give more to feel like you're producing the same.
Yeah, and what happens when they get devalued? They disengage.
Sure.
You know, wherever that is, when they don't see value, that they have value, they just separate from it. They disengage, whether it's in the family or whether it's in the church or whether it's in any organization, because of the sense of no value.
Excellent. Alan, have anything to add to that, or
Yeah,
go back to that?
actually, so I think you hit the nail on the head, Dave, as far as I'll say this. Overload has been my answer, right? I think overload is the problem, and we're working less hours, to your point, yet we're more overloaded. I was just talking to a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and he's like, my dad was not this stressed when he was my age. He had one more kid than I have, and he was not this stressed. And I asked him, were you this stressed? And he's like, no, I was not that stressed. And I'm like, okay, what is it, right? And it's that we all are seeing the picture of the ideal in front of us at all times, right? We're seeing it through commercials, we're seeing it through social media, we're seeing it from our friends, right? Oh, my friend just took his kids on a week-long ski trip, and I guess I'm a bad dad, because I haven't done that. And so it's this picture of the ideal that's making us feel overloaded, and we see it constantly. Another example is that, you know, I was reading Psalms like a couple mornings ago, and I remember being super impacted by some verse. And 2 days later, I was like, I can't remember the verse or the lesson or anything about it because I'm getting so much information. It's like I'm constantly filling my head with a podcast or reading a book or whatever, and all that information is pushing out even the important things that I'm learning. And I just think we're all overloaded.
Yeah. Alan, to continue on that thought, the picture of the ideal man or dad. You know, the other thing, though, that we do, it's not just like the outside pictures of the ideal man, but we actually look back a generation earlier than us, and we see a generation ago being the ideal man. You know what I mean? Like, well, they were tough back then. They didn't cry back then. You know, so I think that kind of affects us too, where we all, I think in this generation, we all feel like we're less than the ideal man because they lived a generation ago, the greatest generation, or, you know, they worked so hard and those things add up too. One answer too to the from the floor about the tax the enemy, the lie that being a man means that we're unattached from our emotions, from grief, and from figuring out how to process things on our own. Randy, you had to kind of goes in line with this answer, but you had posed a question in our pre-discussion about why do men struggle to be honest? Like, why do we struggle to be transparent and honest? what are your thoughts along those lines? What have you seen as a pastor? Why do men, why do you have to peel the layers back to get to how a man is really doing?
Yeah, that's a complex answer. I found that, again, like we find our identity in who we are, and if we really share what's really going on inside of us, it diminishes our identity, and I think shame is a tool the enemy uses in our life to keep us quiet, because if something's happened in our life, it's shame that keeps us in the dark. And so, like, if you were to actually get something out, it's like, well, I'm not the person that that everybody thought I was. And if we have that mindset, then we just try to work really hard to keep that mindset. And so I think what I've discovered is just takes a while for men just to open up, because we're working so hard to keep this identity that everybody believes about us.
Yeah, that's interesting. The idea of identity, I've thought often of how, when we think about the temptation of Jesus, we think it was the temptation of turning the stones into bread, or the temptation of, proving God. But really, I think it was an attack on identity. If you are the Son of God, that was a line Satan took twice with him. If you are who you think you are, prove it. And it's interesting to me that, especially in Luke chapter 3 and 4, at the end of chapter 3, it's the baptism of Jesus. And what happened at the baptism? He comes out of the water, the voice from heaven, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Chapter 4, verse 1 says, immediately he was driven by the Spirit of God into the wilderness, and Satan attacked his identity. And I just think, that picture, I think the idea of identity is one of the primary attacks of the enemy on us. And if we just look at the model of Jesus, it was, my identity is what the Father says about me. And I think that's a critical.
I think to add to that, just respond to it as it relates to the men that I work with. Their identity, you're trying to transition that, and that is a hard thing for them. First of all, in order to transition it, they have to be up and honest about who they really are, and men don't do that well. Even if they come from a jail cell and have all these charges against them, they still, to really penetrate that and lay it on the table is very difficult. But everybody's spoken into their lives. When they say something like, you were talking about a man spoke over you, something you didn't see, but it had an effect on you. Well, you take men who grew up in a home where dad always said, you're worthless, you have that going on. That's speaking on, they become adults, they get into the drug culture, become alcoholics, and everybody's speaking negative into them. To get out of that mindset, we talk about resetting the tapes. That is not an easy thing to happen. That is not an overnight thing. And we find, I think that, and I don't want to give the solution, because I don't know it, but I do think the value of what happened, like in Randy's life, where somebody spoke something constructive into his life, affected him, and that's probably one of the best things men can do for each other, is speak into each other's lives, affirmations. It's transformative what happens there.
Excellent. Okay. I think it's interesting if you look back in time over the last couple of generations, you can see the way that God was. You can see what God was doing in the lives of men, and the biggest one of the last generation are Promise Keepers. It was huge. How many of you guys did a prom or attended Promise Keepers? A handful of you, and it was huge in the nation. There was periods where mentoring was big, periods where coaching is big, and some of that still is. Let's start with you, Alan, because you're part of a couple of these efforts. that men, and the effort flows out of God's Spirit doing something in the hearts of a person. I'm going to put forth effort. But what would you say that God is doing in the lives of men today, Alan?
Yeah, so, one of the things that I think is different is it's more ad hoc, right? It's more kind of random today than it was when, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, there would be a man that would come and say, I want to mentor you. And then we would set, a regular date on the calendar and we would do that. And today it seems like it's more ad hoc, where it's like, okay, someone will say, will you mentor me? And it's more like, when I need it, I'll reach out to you. So that's one thing that I think is different. The other thing that I think is different is that men are more willing, surprisingly willing to open up in the right setting. And so, one of the things that Wild Heart does is they call it a fire. And it's just like a bonfire. You gather around a bonfire and you talk, and you consecrate the time to the Lord. But there's no teaching, nobody prepares the lesson, and men are, the rules are that story is king, that you honor one another, basically by keeping confidential your information, right, and by not diminishing someone else's story. And then the third lesson is they say no BS, right, no posing. And so, those three rules, and then men just sit around and tell their story. You ask a question like, what's your biggest struggle right now? And men tell their story. The Holy Spirit speaks to us through each other's stories a lot of times. And so it's a really cool thing that I think I've noticed in a lot of different settings. It's similar to CBMC. It's a bunch of guys getting around and telling their story. And the interesting thing is that when I am listening to someone else's story, I learn more often than they learn when I'm telling them my opinion about it.
Excellent. There's a fella, just a part of the church at Devil's Lake, and he shared his testimony of coming out of drug and alcohol addiction. But I heard him tell a story once, and he made a comment. He said, I think our Catholic friends understand something we don't about the power there is in confessing our struggles. And, confess your faults one to another that you may be healed is what Scripture says. Maybe for you, Pastor Dave, and Alan, you basically shared on that already, but what do you see at Adult and Teen Challenge in the lives of men when they confess their struggles? Do you see that as a key part of men finding victory?
Yeah, in Teen Challenge, and I should just give a little explanation of the way it works. There are 4 levels that take place. In level 1, they come into the program. They basically handed a Bible and we began reading and studying the Word together. And they're studying what it means to be a man of God. A lot of them come to Christ within the first few days or weeks. When they get to level 2, though, we have a thing called 7 defining moments. And that is the time where we dig deep. It's with the counselor. They are digging out the junk, the garbage, the things in their lives that have affected them to make them who they are today. And what happens when they're in that level, I should say, that those are the days where you kind of walk gently because you're going to get flashes of anger. Okay, because that's when they recognize, the injustices in their lives, where they, all of this stuff comes out, it's laid on the table. But that is so critical, because if they don't get that out, and if they miss something, what we've noticed is if they miss something, and we may not see it, and they graduate at the end, we'll see them struggle or even fail, and they come back, and then that's when it's identified. And I want to respond to the most important thing that we found in the students, we call them students, will tell us the critical aspect of their life is sharing their testimony. Because every time they speak out where they came from, what God's done in their life, it affirms in them what God has done. And when they come to the end and we and we began talking to them the last few months and say, listen, that you are not a former alcoholic. Alcohol is not a part of your name. You're no longer an addict. You've confessed that. God's forgiven it. You are a man of God. And we speak that over them because, but it all comes, confession starts first. And I can tell you that counselors who work with them, it takes some real digging to get it out of them. But when that happens, freedom starts. It's the stuff they're carrying that has really made them the addict or the alcoholic, and which is just a symptom of what really happened in the person.
It's interesting to hear you say, how you teach your men, you're a new creation in Christ, you're not an addict, you're not an alcoholic. And you contrast that with Alcoholics Anonymous, where this fellow and he shared his testimony in Devil's Lake at the church on Easter Sunday. Tremendous story of victory in his life. But he got up and he said, my name is so-and-so and I'm alcoholic. That's how they introduce themselves. And I think they do it so as kind of a confession, I'm always vulnerable to this again.
Well, one of the things that just comment to that and that's something that the Lord really put in my heart, and that is, when they leave Teen Challenge, they are not a former Teen Challenge student. When they go to a local church, I tell them, go to a local church, ask the pastor, I want to become part of a small group. I don't want it to be an alcoholics group. I want to be with normal people who are living normal life, because that is my past. That's not who I am today.
Yeah, wonderful. I had mentioned two messages I feel God had given me for men. One identity and the other on insecurity. For you guys here or anybody in the room, do you feel like God, can I ask the question earlier, like what's God doing in the lives of men today? And one way we can answer that question is by, well, what is God attempting to speak through us to the men around us? So would you guys say that you have a core message, like something right now that's burning on your heart that you feel like, I wish every man could know this. I wish every man could kind of start to grasp the insecurities that we live with and how it affects our relationships. But so for you guys or anyone in the room, like what's a message that you feel, I wish every man knew what I know?
I think one of the things that just burns in my heart is just, again, the identity piece, is just to know who we are as sons of God. If I were to look at you in the room and I were to look you in the eyes and I were to say, you're a good son. Like, you're a good son. How many in the room will just think about all the times that you failed or you're currently failing behind the scenes? Or how many of you guys, when things are going well in your faith, that you feel like you're doing well, feel like you're conquering sin by God's grace, in those moments you feel like a good son? And I think one of the things with sonship is knowing that it has everything to do with the gospel. It has everything to do with that our righteousness is what God accomplished through the person of Jesus Christ. And so the sonship, the understanding that we are a good son, has everything to do with what he has accomplished for us through his son. And one of the things that I feel like has transformed my relationship, even with my own son, is when he has failed or has disappointed me. He's 6 years old and he's just a good kid, but he falls short. And so one of the things that I do when he falls short is I look him in the eyes and I say, you're a good son. And I just see his whole demeanor change, because he's beating himself up with shame and condemnation. And I think if we would let it live out of the sonship, I think we could see a lot more victory. To know that, man, I am a good son because of what God accomplished through the gospel, versus we don't feel like a good son, so we beat ourselves up in shame and guilt and condemnation. And then it's hard to get out of that. So I just feel like for me that would be the core message.
Excellent. I love that, Randy. You say, it's through the gospel, it's through what Christ has accomplished. It's interesting. there's a couple points when in Scripture where we hear what the Father thinks about His Son. And one is at the baptism and others at the transfiguration. But there's another in the Old Testament that I think we miss, and it's in Isaiah when the Father announces who the Messiah is going to be. And he says, His name shall be called. And we always, the Bible translations always put it together as one phrase, Wonderful Counselor. It's not Wonderful Counselor. It's Wonderful and then Counselor. Like the Father was saying, He shall be called Wonderful. And if you go back to the story of when the birth of Samson was announced, the angel comes down, gives him this announcement, and there's, it's an interesting story. It would be in Judges, but a really interesting story. And Samson's parents ask this angel, "What's your name?" And the angel answers, "Why do you ask my name since it is wonderful?" And so the Father in Isaiah is saying, He shall be called Wonderful. And so I think when we receive the gospel, when we accept what's done for us, we can, with God's grace, start to see ourselves the way He sees His Son. You're wonderful. You're a wonderful Son. And I think all of us as dads try to communicate that to our boys. You are a wonderful son. Even in correction, you're a great, great son. How about for any others? What's a core message? Alan?
Yeah, for me, it's just keep going. Just keep going. And, the Bible calls it perseverance. And perseverance, creates character, and character creates hope. A year ago, I almost didn't just keep going. That recent ago, I realized that for the 16 years of my marriage, I hadn't been a really great husband. And unfortunately, my wife realized that at the exact same time as me. And I had, really just demoralized her over the course of our marriage by being judgmental and things like that. And I was like, there's no hope. I don't think that I'm going to be able to improve and really to change my heart fast enough to fix this marriage. I think she has no patience for it because she realized at the same time as me. That was the big problem. But nevertheless, I kept going, and at the same time, I had 3 other friends that were kind of going through similar things. 2 of them are divorced right now. 1 of them is still in counseling. 2 of them didn't keep going. They really didn't. They didn't persevere. And guess what? Today, I have more hope than I've ever had in my life. And the hope, everyone around me is like, so for about 9 months, I called it the Homer Simpson version of Alan that was around. Like, I wasn't the same Alan I had been. I was still going, but I was no longer damaging my wife, but I was actually not doing anything. And so I kept going, and through that, now I have hope. And so I would just say, just keep going.
Excellent. That's Dave. Do you have a message?
Yeah, I think my message would be that to communicate love, and not sparingly. That even though people act up, they aren't acting out the way we want them to be. That we still let them know, because Jesus loved us in whatever condition. He embraced us no matter where we were. And that's important for us to do. Just to give a quick little story. My dad didn't grow up in a home with a family. He was disowned when he was 13 years old. He lived on his own. And so he didn't know what family life was. And so when I was growing up, the one thing my dad never said to me was, "I love you." Never heard it. And of course, it's a generational thing too. He had ways of showing it, which were painful. And that is, he would take his fingers and squeeze your cheek between your fingers, and it hurt like crazy. But that was affection for him. But, and so we intended, intentionally, and I'd say that in relationship to our children, was they never left the home. We never ended a conversation on the phone. Never ended anything without saying, "I want you to know I love you." And we started doing that, and it got so the boys did it with each other, and our two younger boys went to UND together, and their friends would say, "You guys are the craziest guys we ever saw," because they didn't live together, but when they'd get together several times a day, and whenever they parted, they would say to each other, "Grown men, I love you." And they do that even today. Always, and I believe that the message that I believe, and I believe that's working at Teen Challenge for me as it relates to them, is those men know that I accept them no matter what condition they came in, and I love them passionately. And I believe expressing love to one another changes people's lives, and at least gives opportunity for God to work in their life.
Wonderful. Alan, you brought up marriage. What would you, for all of guys in the room, guys on the platform here, but what are some things in marriage that you say has strengthened your relationship? There's a couple words of scripture that I pray regularly. There's one place, and I don't have a text, but it says, to be understanding toward your wife. And it adds that phrase that is politically incorrect or whatever, as a weaker vessel. But the key part to me is be understanding toward your wife. Like, have an understanding heart. I catch myself, when you said, Alan, the way you were treating your wife, I catch myself like, why did I feel I need to comment right there or correct her or whatever? It's not even that I'm correcting her, but I pray that a lot for myself. God, give me an understanding heart, an understanding spirit toward my spouse. Another one is, it says that we should love our wife as the Lord loved the church. How did the Lord love the church? He sacrificed for her. So, for you guys in marriage, what are some key things that have strengthened your marriage or made your response to your spouse better?
Yeah, the one thing I think about the weaker vessel, I think I've heard someone say this before. I'm pretty sure it wasn't my thought. That I like to think of my wife as the precious teacup, right? Like, we have these coffee mugs that you could drop on, they might chip, it's not a big deal, right? But my wife is like the precious teacup, that she's more fragile, she's also worth a lot more, right? So that's the one thought on that. But for me, over the past 18 months or so, that I think I've learned more about marriage in the last 18 months than I probably did in the 16 years before that, was making her my number one ministry. The Bible says that we are to Christ, we're the bride of Christ, right? And that husbands must be Christ-like towards their wives, right? We are to act towards them the same way that Christ did to the church, that he died for them. Well, I was like, yeah, I'd take a bullet for Melanie, right? That was what in my head, I'm picturing myself like, somebody's going to shoot my wife, I'm going to jump in front of it, I'll take that bullet for her.
Wow.
Yeah. But when it came to actually dying to myself and my desires, I was really bad at that. And that was the key, is that I think I was so wrapped up in facts. Like, well, I know the facts. I'm pretty sure I'm right about the facts here. But the facts are really less important when Melanie and I are arguing about, what happened with this kid when we were correcting them, or what happened with work, or what I said earlier that day, or whatever. And I'm like, no, I didn't say it that way. Those facts are unimportant. What's important is her heart. Right? She's my number one ministry. Christ doesn't argue the facts with us. He is, neither do I condemn you. So that's it.
I know I've been here since Wednesday, and my wife's been home alone with the kids. I know I have to, when I walk through the door, I have to be ready to let her unload a little bit if she needs to. So even though, like, to me, I'm like, oh, I'm excited to see you, and it seems like you get home and she's ready to unload what she's been carrying for 3 days. So, right?
I think it just has everything to do with what you just said, Lucas. Realizing that your wife is human, and how can you help her take care of your human needs? And because as men, speaking for myself, I'm pretty selfish, but to know that she's human, that she needs sleep, she needs time with Jesus. She needs, my wife and I really enjoy exercising, so like I'll stay back so she can go exercise. And just like helping her take care of her human needs. And when she's flourishing as a human, she just flourishes as a mom, she flourishes as a wife. And so helping her get time with the Lord and just like, what are my wife's needs, and to realize that she's human. And how can I help take care of her in her humanity as well?
How do you, with the pressures of life, Anne works full time, right?
Yeah.
And you have 4 kids?
You have 4 kids.
And a dog.
And a dog, Charlie.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you find time to take care of your wife's human needs with that type of schedule?
Yeah, I think it's just realizing it's a priority. So I'm a pastor, so my schedule's pretty flexible. Like I kind of create my own schedule, and so I think just in the regular rhythm of the day, so when she comes home and I come home, just said, hey, I'll help make supper. Why don't you go and get a workout in or go for a run? And it just is that practical thing of like when she comes home, she's human too, and not putting the expectation on that she has to take over now. But to realize, like, man, when she maybe gets a workout in or she gets time with the Lord, she's just healthier. And we all are, right? And then, we get frustrated that they're not superhuman. But she's a real human. And so I just try to prioritize her needs too, even in my schedule. Like, I could take another meeting, but how can I help serve her as well?
Great. Pastor Dave, you said you've been married going on 53? So
Yeah.
we're all here to learn from you. So.
Yeah, 52 good years, or I should say 2 good years, 50 struggled, not really.
Yeah.
What I've learned, one thing I was thinking as they were talking, some of you may know Connie, and she's she's a sweet gal, but she's tough as nuts, let me tell you. And I think that what has happened in our lives, what probably has made us stronger as a couple is hardship. We've had a number of times where things have been really difficult, but it was amazing. It has amazed me the resolve she has had. There have been times when I have said I quit, I'm done, and she's dug her heels in and said, no, you're not. You're standing up, going to be a man here, and so. And I concur with these others too, in the fact both Connie and I work. Connie works full time, and I do too. And so, a couple of things that are really critical that I recognize now that are important, and that is that we take time to talk. We get home at night. I walk through the door. Connie asks, "How's my day?" And she fixes dinner. I clean it up. It's just what we do, because then she has time to relax. She's also leading the Teen Challenge Choir, so she can work on those kinds of things. And so we spend a lot of time talking, probably more than we ever did when we had children, because we got just each other and we don't have a dog. And so,
Do you want one?
No, it was I love dogs, but it was a happy day when we put him to rest. And so then we were really free. Communication is so important. And I was thinking when they were talking about sharing, just one quick thing. When we were youth pastors in Everett, and it was really difficult. We went through a difficult season there, and I'd come home at noon, and in the evening, and we'd have our conversations, and I would talk about my frustrations and every day, then I'd go back to work, and I came home one day and started unloading, and Connie said to me, she said, "This isn't working." She said, "You come home and you dump your stuff on me, and you go back here happy, you've unloaded. Who do I bring it to?" We had little children, she didn't have a circle. and I learned that, you know, to give her what she wants, but not more than she needs. That's made us a really happy life. And so.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we're out of time here. I want to do a few giveaways. So if you haven't signed up yet for that, you could ndmen.org/win. ndmen.org/win. I'm getting all sorts of. I got William Shatner on here, several others. So anyway, Chadwick. Okay. Any other thoughts in closing, guys, and then we'll give away some prizes here. Anything in wrapping it up?
I think as a man, you know, the Bible talks about rejoice with those who rejoice, but we weep with those who weep. If you can be a man that rejoices in other men's victories, and don't be jealous of them, like just celebrate them and cheer them on. Like we all need that. And I think just, if you can be that guy, like if somebody's winning in life or they're winning in ministry, had a great success, celebrate them. Text them and just say, man, I'm so happy for you. We're celebrating with you. Don't be that guy who's insecure that can't celebrate other people's wins.
The one thing that I would say is transparency, right? Transparency is attractive. I was just talking to about someone in church about this, and they're like, I don't know why it is that these, you know, the evangel draws me in sometimes, and I was like, well, there's a lot of transparency that we hear from like Pastor Josh when we get the sermon. It's attractive when people, and so with men, it's, you know, when you meet with men and you're transparent about what you're struggling with, or you're transparent about what brings you joy, even, those are the things that that really draw people in and they open up to.
Excellent. Any other final thought, Pastor Dave?
The only thing I think is honor and treat people with respect. And the people that I work with, and of course they come out of the prison system, respect is a big thing to them. If you disrespect them, you're going to get some back pressure. And kind of concurring with what they said, we set in motion that we would celebrate even the small things. Because in our setting, in their lives, very few things have been celebrated, you know, and the smallest successes, and it gets you encouraged to go on. It's the same with your children. Celebrate what happens. The little successes they have, it's amazing what it does in their lives.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. We're going to do giveaways. Judah Negron, we got a Starbucks gift card for you, Judah. And then cruise through here, I got a Olive Garden gift card for Reed Buckley. Reed, there you are, sir. Please along. I have a William Shatner, who's not getting anything. We got Chad, Dangerous Prayers, Craig Rochelle, Chad Hammondtree. There you are, Chad. Thank you. And I got everyone's getting the gifts apparently. Tim Rockstead. You can choose, Tim, between one of these. Actually, choose between what you want down there. And then, Chad, are you here? You grabbing a gift?
He walked out.
Oh, you have to be here to win.
Yeah.
So.
You had to help Bailey.
Yeah. That's too bad. Daniel Rudabaugh. Yeah, you can pick what you want there, Daniel. And then finally, the massager unit there goes to Lucas Isgrate. Lucas Isgrate. Oh, it's me. Lucas Isgrate. Oh. Who was that? Is that you?
No, that was also Chad.
Yeah, of course. Lucas is great. No, Elias Carroll. Elias, you got the you got a hat if anyone wants it. Actually, I know Chad already got one of those, so we won't.
Yeah, it looks
So we won't give that to him. Let's get
Mother's Day gift.
Let's get to the back row, boys. Oh, I was trying to go a little deeper there. Okay, let's pray. Thank you guys for being here. We got about 15 minutes till the closing session, and we'll wrap up. Father, we bless you today